Hello everyone, my name's Brian, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the FESTOOL Domino. I've had a FESTOOL Domino for about 7 years, and I've put it through its paces. I've used it to make cabinetry, I've used it to make lots of furniture, and also I've used it for things that it wasn't intended to be used for. So the goal of today's review is to provide you an overview of how FESTOOL, I believe, intended for you to use this tool. In addition to that, I wanted to show you some ways that I use it that are outside the guardrails or outside the lines, and I hope this is helpful to you. You may be wondering what the FESTOOL Domino does. The basics are that it is a loose mortise and tenon joinery system, and what it does is it enables you to cut these slots and to use these loose tenons. And here you can see an example of where I've used the FESTOOL Domino and I've created some joinery to connect two different boards. So anywhere where you have two boards coming together, you could use this to create a connection. The nice thing about dominoes as opposed to dowels is that dowels, if I used a single dowel, then I would be able to rotate this workpiece. It would pivot about the center point. But dominoes, because they're an ellipse type shape, prevent you from rotating this once you have it connected together. So you only really need one domino to create a connection to where the pieces won't rotate. Now the dominoes come in different sizes. Here you can see this is a sustainer where you can get different size dominoes. You can also buy these in individual packages. This sustainer comes with dominoes in sizes of 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10 millimeters, and I've used them all for different types of furniture. In addition to this, the sustainer that comes with your FESTOOL Domino, so these are a separate purchase than your FESTOOL Domino, but again you can buy these in a sustainer or as a kit, or you could buy these in individual bags and just use the main ones that you're using. For these different size dominoes, inside the sustainer that your DF500 comes in, you have a series of these bits that also come in the matching sizes of 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10 millimeters to cut the slots. One last thing about these dominoes, you can use these beach dominoes that FESTOOL makes and sells, or you can get router bits that would allow you to make your own dominoes and make them out of different types of wood. So I tend to mostly use the dominoes that FESTOOL provides me, but there are some reasons where you might consider making your own, especially when we go outside the guardrails and into some of the things I'll show you later. So let's look at some of the accessories that comes in your domino set. Here you can see this is a stile and rails attachment. This simply allows you to adjust this to the width. These green knobs down here allow you to adjust this to the width of the stile rail. I've used this a lot in my woodworking, primarily in making doors and making furniture pieces and connecting them together. And simply you adjust that to the width, but you actually don't make the adjustment until after you line things up. So you attach that by sliding it on there, and then there are these little attachment pieces that go over and lock it into place, and you just screw those down, and now you're ready to use it. And we're going to use this, I'm going to demonstrate using this on a case where we're trying to join a board vertically here onto our horizontal piece that's laying here on the bench. And all we really need to do this is just 2 pencil lines, and this will allow us to line everything up. You can now assemble the 2 pieces that we made the joinery and our loose tenons. So we can put our tenon in here. Sometimes you need to tap that in, have a little bit of persuasion with the mallet. And then there's our joining piece, and then we would simply add glue in order to make that connection. Something I didn't show you in the video that you just saw is that the cutting depth for this piece was different than the cutting depth for this wider piece. And to adjust that on my FESTOOL Domino, I use this on the side, and these measurements go anywhere from 12 millimeters to 28. There's different increments. I adjusted that so that for my 3/4 inch thick board, I didn't push that beyond that and end up with a hole or a slot all the way through. So I cut deeper into this piece and shallower into this piece by in between those cuts making this adjustment. Another feature that could be adjusted or setting is the fence depth that is in this vertical direction. So there's a lever over here on the top. If you flip that over, you can adjust this vertically, and if you don't like losing your depth that you like for a setting, there are these incremental adjustments here, so you could push this in or out, and this can set against that hard stop, and then you can lock it in place and you can adjust what that depth is for you. In addition, I don't use this feature very much, there's an angle adjustment, so you can, I pretty much keep it perpendicular, but you can release this, and this allows you to adjust the angle of the fence. There are index stops in here at specific angles, and so if that's important to you, you might like that feature. And so you can lock that back in place. One more adjustment that is interesting is that you can select the width of the slot. And so in this workpiece here, I left them the same. I used the narrowest setting here on the domino, but you can make this slot wider by simply rotating this knob. They tell you not to rotate this knob to the other settings while the tool is off, but you should do that while the tool is running. You can make a wider slot, and this comes in handy for a variety of purposes that we'll talk about in a little bit. Another accessory that comes with your FESTOOL domino is this indexing kit. So you can use this if you want a domino a specific distance from the edge. You can use this feature right here, put this against the edge of your board, and this will allow you to put a domino a prescribed distance. And then you can use, once you put a domino into that distance, if you want equal distance dominoes, then you could move this over and index that domino to set the next domino. So you can make a series of dominoes a set distance apart from one another using this indexing tool. So let's next say you want to put a domino in the face of this board. We could do this by loosening this fence, putting this towards perpendicular, and then we'd have the ability to put the domino in vertical. What we still might want is a little bit of stability, because in this direction we don't have much stability. FESTOOL's provided this in your accessories, this little fence. There's a couple of holes on the bottom of this that you can attach that, and then by simply tightening those down, we get a couple of things. In addition to improving our stability that you will see, we also get an additional alignment mark here that we can use, and this crevice that shows up in there lines up with the center of the domino. One more thing to say about indexing, and that is that these indexing accessories only allow you to go so close to the center of the tool or the center of the domino. You might want a narrower option for indexing, and when that is the case, FESTOOL's provided these features here, and you can use those, put those on the edge of your board and index and get a shorter distance for your indexing. I've mentioned that you can change out the bit that goes inside of your FESTOOL domino for those different size dominoes. So I'm now going to demonstrate how you would do that. So they make this pretty easy. The kit comes with a wrench that you use, and all you have to do is lift up the tool like that, this little lever, and then you slide this out. So now you've got this separate, and then you rotate it over, and there's a little locking mechanism right here, and so you can take the locking mechanism, hold that down, rotate your tool, and you can loosen this by hand. And you can put on your new cutting bit, and they tell you, if I remember correctly in the instructions, to just tighten this snug by hand. To put this back together, you simply align this hole with this shaft, and there's also a shaft on the side and along with a mating hole. So you line those two up, slide it together, you hear a click, and then now it's all back together and you can feel it. Two things. The first one is that everything fits compactly into the sustainer, so it's nice for folding this up and storing the tool. A second one was whenever I was making the cuts, you did not see a lot of sawdust. In fact, I bet you didn't see any in that video clip. And that's because there's a dust port over here on the side. Your dust extractor will pull a lot of the dust away, and that's very helpful. There's not dust to clean up, and there's not much dust floating through the air as well. So I've already shown you how you might use the domino to connect two boards that are perpendicular to one another. So let's look at making a panel. We can also use the domino to make panels. Very useful for this. And this is where some of the settings are important on the domino. For instance, I might want to align the edges of these two boards. So when I put the first domino in here, I will have the domino on its normal settings, or the normal width. The slots that get made are only the width of this first domino. But on dominoes that I put along the length of this, what I might do, or what I would do, is I would turn this to the wider setting so that I don't have to be perfectly aligned in all those dominoes relative to the first domino. And that way, everything comes together nicely. I've already mentioned previously that you could get this sustainer full of dominoes from FESTOOL, and the individual dominoes can be sold in like these big bags. So if you use all the dominoes of one particular size, you can just refill that size and you have a nice storage unit as well. Another thing you might want to do is integrate knockdown fasteners into your furniture. So here's an example of one of the knockdown connectors or corner connector that you can make with the FESTOOL domino. So these simply go together like that in two different pieces of wood. They fit in the slots that get cut, and then you can tighten this and it will pull the two pieces of wood together. It comes with these individual pieces. So if we take this apart, they give you these individual pieces that come in the sustainer. This comes all apart. Similarly, this piece comes apart as well. And when we open the sustainer, you can see that there's lots of these parts. So there's lots of these connectors that come in here. So in addition to the corner connector, there are different types of connectors that you can use that all integrate well with the FESTOOL domino. So what I've covered so far is the corner connector, which shows up here in the upper left. But there are other connectors that you can use for knockdown hardware. Each of these is listed here. They cover different cases that you might want for different furniture configurations, such as shelves. If we look at our kit, what comes with our kit is this screwdriver, which is important. It's the size of the Allen wrench, 3mm, that goes with the hardware in the kit. The kit also comes with a drilling jig and the drill bit that you would need to use it. So the drill bit has a stopper on it, so you drill down to the depth that you want, and this part of your jig inserts into the domino slot that you cut with the domino. And here you can see the end result, which is that this is the hole that is drilled, and this is the slot that gets drilled with the FESTOOL domino. In this kit, you have these pieces that act as, they go into a domino slot on one side. The hardware that goes with it is this piece, and also our Allen wrench, a piece with the Allen wrench that we need our Allen wrench for. This inserts into here, and we have, this will go into our slot, and then we push this into our hole, and then they are together. This will be connected to one of these that goes on the other side. Now let's talk about some ideas that are outside the lines. Ways in which using your FESTOOL domino were not necessarily initially intended by FESTOOL. So the first one is I integrate the usage of my FESTOOL with my CNC machine. So what I mean by that is that I might make the cuts into the end grain with my FESTOOL domino, but the mating portion on the mating piece, I might actually cut this with the CNC machine. So it's quite easy to cut with. I use a 1/4 inch to cut the 6mm size hole, and I just use a pair of calipers to measure the size. And this is especially helpful because you would have to create this by moving the fence to vertical, and then lining everything up. And it requires a lot of layout if you're doing it there, but on your CNC machine you can precisely locate that where you want in space. This is especially helpful on a big panel. Another idea that would help you integrate this tool with your traditional woodworking would be to make a slot that's wider than the width of one domino. And we can do that by using multiple center lines here and have them overlap. This will allow us to have a mortise that is much wider and that would connect with the mating tenon. As you can see, I didn't quite line this up properly, but I had this cocked at an angle a little bit. But you can use this idea to create slots that will allow you to essentially eliminate your mortising press in many cases. Now for a third idea that we could use the FESTOOL domino that's outside the lines. It's a common problem when you have miter joints to figure out how to connect these and create a solid joint. If you just put glue on the end grain, then connecting these two pieces together, there's not much, it doesn't hold it very well. There's not a very strong joint. So often what people do is they might put a loose tenon on the inside, or on the back side of this they might connect this somehow. And to make this more decorative, often what people do is on the outside of your frame they will cut splines, and then you might use a wood that's of a different type of material, such as here I have 2 pieces of walnut. I might, for instance, use cherry to get a contrast there in the aesthetics. So why it might be more common to create splines on your table saw or on your router table, I'm going to demonstrate using a little jig that I made how to do this with your FESTOOL domino. So after all that, perhaps the one question that's on your mind is, would I buy this tool again? Thinking through that question, I would say that I've owned this tool for 7 years. I've made benches, step stools, cabinetry, and during that time, this tool has stood the test of time. I haven't treated it like a princess. It's worked really well. The answer is yes, I would definitely buy this tool again. I've used it so much. And perhaps the only thing that I would request if I had a remake of this version is that I would like to, instead of millimeters, maybe I would want to have this in imperial units, since everything else in my shop is in imperial units or inches. But other than that, I think it's been a really helpful tool, and I don't really have drastic changes other than I would like for it to come with that spline jig that I showed you in that final clip. If you already have dust extractors and other FESTOOL tools in your shop, then I think this would make a great addition to your lineup of tools that you use. It'll help you be more efficient. However, I would also say that there's a lot of joy that you might get in learning to cut joinery by hand. Another thing to consider is what are the costs of maintaining the tool over time. And my costs have been relatively small. I've not even had to replace the bits that I use for the domino, but the consumables are the wooden dominoes that you use for connecting workpieces. But outside of that, that's been the only ongoing cost other than an initial investment. Perhaps one other anecdotal is that I really don't put my FESTOOL domino up. I have the sustainer kind of off to the side, and I tend to have this just tucked underneath the workbench because I use it so often that it's really not worth me putting it up.